In this video, we shall talk about some of the stuff that you're not including in your CSS, which is making your buttons not stand out. I'll be sharing some of my personal favorite tricks or tips that I do whenever I want to design or add kind of a effect for a button on fly. Now, these are generally kind of like my go-to effects if I want to add a button into a site. Let's dive in and let's see how to add these. Okay, so in my index.html, here inside of the body, first let's add a button and let's give it a class of btn1 and let's add some text. It says read now. So this is the button. Now this is already at the center. So what I did is I have some default styling added here. So in the body, I've set the display property as flex and I've added justify content, align items as center so that the content, all the content that we have is at the center. And also I've set the gap as 50 pixels so that whenever we add multiple buttons, they kind of have a gap 50 pixels each. So this is the button. Now let's say I am a beginner and I don't know how to style it. So what I would do is I would basically add a button and I would give it a width and a height and a background color maybe. And I might remove the outline and also I might remove the border. Let's say, so this is how it looks. And then also I might add the color as white because the black was not that much readable. And then let's resize it a bit. We can have maybe 40 pixels, let's say. So yeah, I might do something like this, which is okay to a certain extent, but then let's say the text that we have here, it is not read now. Let's say the text that we have here is something long. Let's say Rorom, and I'll just write 5. Let's say it is something like this. Now what would happen? You see the text is getting wrapped up, and then this is not looking good. And also if the text in future is maybe a bit bigger in size, which should not be because buttons are not that large. But let's say if the text has a bigger font, then what would happen is that the text would end up coming out or basically overflowing out of the button, which you don't really want to happen. So what you do is you basically don't use width and height. So we're going to target the BTN, and then also you see the flat color that we have here. This does not look or stand out much. So what we can do is instead of having a flat color for your buttons, we can do something different. So first in the button, we can add padding. Now what this padding does is that it adds sufficient gapping from top and as well as from bottom and left and right for your text content. And then if the text in case is longer in size, the width of the button would automatically adjust. So you don't really need to specify the width. And then keep in mind that whenever you're adding some kind of font to your website, keep in mind that by default, buttons don't really take in the font that you're applying on the body. So you need to specifically add fonts to the button. So here I've specified the font family as Pure Sans. And then the background, instead of adding a flat color like this, you can add a linear gradient, which adds more style or more depth to the button that you create. So here I can just write 45 degrees, and then here I can specify 3 kind of variants of the same color. Let's save. So this is how it looks. Now I'll remove the outline, and the border I can give maybe 1 pixel solid of the same red color, and then the color can be white. You see, now this button looks way better than the previous flat red button because this has a bit more style and design because of this linear gradient. So this is one type of button that you can come up with. And then also you can add a box shadow to kind of have more depth to the button. So shadows always help when you're trying to give some kind of focus to a certain element. In this case, we're using it on a button. So we can have here a 2 pixel of horizontal spread, or basically the x-axis shade that you want to have, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, and then the blur radius you can have as 10 pixels. And then you can have the RGBA value of alpha with 0.1, let's say. Now, since the background is dark, you're not able to see, we can just maybe something like this, okay? This is too white, it's and something like this. So this has a bit of box shadow underneath. So if you want to add this button on top of some kind of element, then this would definitely pop up. So yeah, this is one type of button. Then you can have another type of button, let's just say BTN2, and here we'll write read later. So here, same, I would just add the padding, font family, outline in border none. Since this time we're going to be having a custom border. Now in case, let's say you want to have a linear gradient kind of border, or maybe gradient border. So you cannot add linear gradient or gradient border in this border property. So what we need to do is we need to come up with a solution that lets us add border as linear gradient, but then not using this border property, since this doesn't really allow us. So what we can do is in the BTN2, what you can do, we can set the background as a linear gradient. So I'll just paste in the linear gradient values. This is the background. And then I can set the position of the button as relative. And then I can also add a border radius to add some curve to the edges. Okay. And now I'm going to be adding a pseudo element. In this case, we're adding the before pseudo element. And then here inside of the content, so here I'll just add a data attribute, which would say read later. And now I'll take this text read later. Now you have two read later. But what I would do is I would position this before element absolute and give it a top, left, bottom, and right value of 1 pixels, meaning that it should take up entire width and height, only leave 1 pixels from top, left, bottom, and then right, so that it kind of has this linear gradient background as the border of the button. Let's save. Okay, and let's add a background color. So you see, it kind of has the linear gradient as the border now. Now here we need to add the same border radius. So I'll just add 4 pixels of border radius. And then the text that we added from the data attribute, we're going to place it at the center using display grid and place content to center, since we have only one element directly inside of this parent. So we can just place this at the center using display grid and place content to center. Now if I save, you see the text is now at the center. So this is how you apply gradient borders to the buttons. Now there's a third type of button that you can add. So I'll just copy this and I'll add BTN3. And here I've just copied the styles from BTN2 and I pasted here. So in the BTN3, I'd add one more thing, that is box shadow. So you can add a box shadow along with this linear gradient. So here the box shadow would not have any X or Y value, so I'll just leave it as 0. But then the blur radius would be 1 pixels, and I would have this color. And then I would add another layer of the same box shadow, but then this time the blur radius would be 2 pixels. And then I would add another, and then one more. Each time I add, you would see the blur radius is kind of doubled, or at least I've increased it by 1. So you can see that we have kind of like a glow effect on the button. So this is using this box shadow. So if you want to add more kind of like a neon effect to the website, you can definitely add this in your buttons. So this is the third type of button that you can create. Now, there may be, or there can be a lot and different kind of variations that you can do with these 3 types of buttons. And also in general, if you want to build a site, you can use so many different types of effects using the button element. But then here I'll just be showing you guys some of my go-to, or maybe some basic effects that I use whenever I have to create a site on fly. Now here you can have a BTN4, and here I'll just paste in the same styles from BTN2, and here you would see that I don't have the background. So here I would add the background linear gradient, but this time I'll just change the gradient colors. Okay, I've added a bit of purple shade here. And now what you can do is you can add animations to this linear gradient background. So to add animations, you need to add the background size. And here I'm setting the X as 200%, and then Y I'm setting it as auto. And then here I would add a transition. So the transition should be for the background position. And then I'm adding a time of 2 seconds. And then the animation. So the animation name would be gradient. The animation should be for 2 seconds. And they should have the ease effect. And also they should run for infinity. And then here I would add the keyframes for the gradient animation. So for 0%, meaning when it is starting off or at its initial state, and then 50% when it is 50% done, and then 100% when it is complete. So we have 3 states. So initially, the background position should be 0% X, Y should be 50%. When it is 50% done, you want the X to be 100%, and then Y same as 50%. And then when it is 100% complete, the Y would remain same, but then the X would come back to its original position, which is 0%. Let's save and let's see. So if I were to zoom out, you can see that we have an animation going here. So you can see the violet color is kind of rotating from one side to other. So this is happening because of the animation. So yeah, this is it, guys. I hope you learned something from this video. So this video is I kind of wanted to show you guys or teach you how to add variants to the different button styles that you can add for your site. Now you don't really need to always have the same flat or different hover animations for your buttons. You can also, without hover effect, you can have simple and sleek buttons. So yeah, I just wanted to share some of simple tricks how you could do it. So this is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. The source code will be down in the description. If you find this video helpful, make sure to subscribe and like the video, comment down what you liked, and meet you guys in the next video. Till then, bye bye, take care.